Daniel, I'm going to say to Unit 11741, like, you guys have saved the lives of my teammates, of my team, and I know it because we have the helmet, the pictures, the ball bearings when four of the guys on my team were killed, and there were six more injured. One of them, his helmet, was it was stopped. The Sharfanel stopped and saved his life. So I'm forever grateful.
Joining me today is Ari Abramowitz, the founder and CEO, executive director, something of that important nature, of Nivut, which is an organization helping soldiers from the United States that have served in the Israel Defense Forces and find themselves in America. Ari, thanks for joining the Mail Time podcast here.
Daniel, thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure to know you for a while now and just be able to see all the activity that you do and just be part of it and actually be on the recipient end of it. So I really, really appreciate this and for giving me the opportunity to share.
No, listen, you guys are, well, let's start with this. We can go into how we met. First, how did you make a decision to be a lone soldier in the Army?
I'll tell you, just straight out, I struggled in school. I was a good boy, but just school was a really big challenge for me here in the United States. And for myself, I needed to feel something that I could actually make a difference. I loved outdoors. I loved being able to push myself, and I wanted to be able to find something that gave me some meaning, waking up every day. And I had a lot of pushback from different people in the United States saying, "Why are you going to Israel even? This is not, it's not your war. It has nothing to do with you. Why would you go there? You can go to college. You can go become a paramedic, EMT." And there was just this big void that was missing, and someone that's, I love finding meaning in things and being able to feel like I can make a real difference. The IDF was something that was unique and gave me this opportunity at the same time doing something that I literally could put my whole body and my whole actual life into.
And how long did you serve in the IDF?
So I'm actually just so people understand that there's something called Sadir, which is many of the soldiers that they go. That's the regular mandatory service. So someone from outside, a lone soldier, which we're called, is someone from outside of Israel, doesn't have immediate family in Israel. You have, approximately a year and a half to, unless you make Aliyah, then you have a longer time. But you have something called the Sadir, which is your basic, your mandatory service. And then after that, you have something called Miluim, which is the reserves, which you heard about through this war, was all of a sudden Israel has this massive call up because the war started and they need reservists. They can't hold with the regular units that are in the IDF on a regular day to day, just be able to hold the lines. So I've been part of that since 2015. So I drafted my regular mandatory service, or mandatory as we call it, from 2009, 2010. And then in 2015, I joined my reserve unit and I've been there ever since.
But right now you're living in America. So what was your experience, or how did you end up back in America? I guess is a better question. How did you end up back in America after making a decision that you're going to go defend the state of Israel? And I believe you got married in Israel, correct?
Yeah, so just a little bit about myself to all the listeners and followers over here, just to get a little understanding of it. There's two tracks of lone soldiers. There's one track that a lone soldier goes there doing a program called Mahal, which is a Mitnadev Chutz La'aretz, which means someone that's an out foreign overseas volunteer. So that's what I was. You go there, you're not an Israeli citizen, and they expect you to go back to your home country after. So after my service, I picked up on a plane and went back to the United States to actually get my rabbinical ordination. And then after that, I actually made Aliyah a few years later to be able to join the reserves again. So that was where, but I got married in the United States after finishing my service, came back here, and that's how my story begins.
Okay, so Rabbi, should have said that at the beginning. Apologies. Um, where were you on October 7th?
So let's give a little bit of where I was. I was with another 30 other lone soldier veterans, meaning those that served in the IDF and were now back here in the United States. We were in the middle of having a program, and we'll go into that obviously, but we were having a program, and I got a call actually, I got a knock on the door from one of the soldiers, one of the veterans, and banging on the door. There's a war in Israel going on. We're like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, there's right now Hamas invaded Israel, and there's over 100 dead. I was like, you got to be joking. This doesn't make any sense. And then he showed me, it's like, no, this is really going on. And I got a call from my officer a few hours later as being a reservist that we need all the manpower possible. Everyone's jumping down to the south, but the north is wide open. There's no one there. And that's where there was a massive call up of literally just getting bodies of soldiers, reservists, to be able to defend the front lines by Lebanon because they were worried about the Redouan, which is the Hezbollah special forces, being able to just do exactly what Hamas did. Just charge right into Israel, just start taking over village after village after village, just doing a massacre like that. And Israel wasn't prepared for that at all. And they just crammed everyone up to the north. Literally, as many soldiers as possible. Whoever was up in the north, you literally would go like, you would just see in the woods, there were just soldiers, there were personnel carriers, there were tanks, they're just lined up everywhere. It was almost like just stuffing a can of like people, a can of sardines, just like along the whole entire border, just to make sure that there wouldn't be an invasion coming in from Hezbollah.
Were you nervous driving up there, thinking, well, I guess we're skipping a part in which you had to get on a plane and go to Israel, but
Yeah.
once you got to Israel and you went up north, were you expecting a massive firefight? Obviously, anyone who saw those videos on October 7th was shaken up and probably has a bit of their soul changed in a way until today, right? You can't watch those videos and be the same. Were you anticipating confronting Hezbollah immediately?
I'll tell you a little how I felt when going there. There were two parts of this. There's the soldiers just picked up and went, and you had some that were no one knew what was happening. It was terrifying for everyone. How long to be there for? What's going to be happening? No one knew. Really, no one knew what to expect. No one knew what was going on, and just sharing from the people in my unit, even just so people understand this, like there was no information. No information. No one had their phones with them. People didn't know what's going on. You're getting, information a little later. It's dark at night. You can't show any lights. It was definitely for everyone. It was just this unknown of what's going on. It was really, very, very scary for everyone. But after a while, starting to get used to that. And I would just say, just for people that understand what's going on there, just my whole unit, there was no one there there were no tents, no nothing. Everyone just had to figure out how to make shelter. Just getting rained on,
What do you
getting
mean
just,
make shelter? You're in the IDF or you're a reserve. You've been called up. You received the Tzav Shmona. You were called up.
so I'm gonna take one step back over here just to let's give this a little bit more clarity on what's going on. There's the Tzav Shmona when is the call for when there's war. They'll call up the soldiers to come out to Israel, and that was something that we saw, from the beginning, was everyone got called up, but like I mentioned, they just put everyone in the north, they put everyone in the south, they put everyone all over different areas. And when you're in the woods and you're on the front lines, it doesn't make a difference if it's raining or snowing. There's not a shelter. You're just out there and you're guarding, and you're just gonna do with whatever you have. That's what you're gonna do your best to be able to defend. And so this was actually very interesting to be able to see the equipment that was received. So every unit's different, and I've been just to people know a little bit more of my background. Daniel, if you don't mind, I'll just jump to a little bit back of what I do and where it connects with all this. So, and going back to 2015, I joined the reserves, and then in 2017, my wife and I, we moved back to the States, and we'll get obviously into a little bit about what I do on a day-to-day with dealing with the lone soldiers back here with Nivut. But the interesting thing was I've been part of this reserve unit in Carmeli, which is one of the reserve units that people that have been in the Golani Brigade come out of, and we've seen that we've had certain equipment in these bases all the way up north in case of a war for many, many years. But the challenging piece was that it was old equipment. I mean, there were new pieces, new items that we had, but they were from the Second Lebanon War, which is 2006. It's brand new. Some of the things were brand new. Some of the things you didn't have. Pieces that you needed for equipment weren't there, and everyone was just trying to improvise with what they had. And I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest miracles that people don't even talk about this. And my officer brought this up to us, just so people could understand the miracles that went on also during this time. They just threw everyone up to the north with their guns weren't even zeroed in. So you had a gun. If someone would come shooting at you, and just if people understand when you shoot, you have to go when you do target practice, you have something called zeroing in your gun, which you make sure that it's going to be accurate when you have to shoot. All these soldiers were sent to the front lines with guns that they had no idea if they actually shot or not, if they were, because they just needed everyone to go up there.
I'll
And
tell
it
you.
took,
Let me just jump in with one story. I was meeting. There was someone from Shayet at Shloshesrei, which is the Navy SEALs of the IDF, and I had the good fortune of meeting this person outside of Kibbutz Be'eri the first or second week of November, and we had helmets. We're giving helmets to soldiers that were in need. And I apologize. It was someone. It was outside. It was Shaitat Shloshesrei, the Israeli Navy SEALs. It was the beginning of December, and I saw this group coming out of Gaza, and they looked exhausted, looked about mid-30s, maybe early 40s, and all of them had just disgusting, expired equipment that wouldn't do anything in a paintball game, let alone fighting Hamas or Hezbollah. And I asked them, I said, boys, how do new helmets sound right now? And they said, haha, don't make a joke like that. It's not funny. I said, no, I'm serious. I said, you're not joking? I said, no, they're on the way. Just wait 10 minutes. And the commander said, okay, I'm going to wait 10 minutes, but you better not be pulling my leg or we're going to have problems. And I became very, very close with that commander. And maybe 4 months, 5 months later, I was back in Israel with a friend, and we stopped by his house. And my friend said, I don't understand. How would you go in without a helmet that works? Because, you wouldn't go in with a gun that didn't work. And he said, well, let me actually tell you that when we actually tried to use many of them, they did not work. And that was an issue. Forget even zeroing in. You had jamming and all sorts of other problems. And he was going on and saying, no, there was times where a guy was actually in Gaza and discovers his gun really does not work. So it actually speaks to how amazing the IDF soldiers are, because I think if you were to see something like that in different armies, my guess would be people would say, yeah, take a hike. I'm going home. I'm going to go hang out with my family, and I'm
they
not
would
risking.
desert. It's
Yeah,
just that clear. They would just leave the front
yeah,
lines and that's it. I'm
yeah.
done.
So it's funny to me that you then saw that up north in that same way. Um, yeah. Okay. So
It's interesting, Danny. I want to bring this up a little bit just to give you asked a little bit about my background. I actually want to go into the day-to-day of what I do purposely because it will connect very well with these stories on the front line. Just so you have this clarity for it. So, and just my little history that I wanted to bring out was in 2017 when we moved back to the States, and going back and forth as a reservist. I would fly out every single year for usually between 2 weeks to a month at a time as a reservist. But during that time while I was here, there was many lone soldiers that were coming back to the States and were struggling, and they didn't have that support system. And that's where, my wife and I, we created this organization, Nivut, which helps out with the well-being of the soldiers when they're back here. So it was actually a very interesting piece for me by the wartime, I got called up on the day of October 7th, and our program deals with the well-being of the lone soldiers when they're back here. And one of the things that we saw was, you know, my officer called me and I said, I'm going to come in a few weeks because the amount of soldiers that need the support going to Israel, many of them don't even have the equipment, don't have the proper pieces, and we just have to make sure that they're taken care of because, again, the well-being of a soldier, we want to make sure they're not going to be just blinded of, going into a war zone, and especially obviously we deal with the parents and we deal with the spouses of them, and there was a very big struggle with that. But I actually, after telling my officer that I'm going to be coming in a few weeks, so I was able to, in turn, be able to send, we sent over 250 soldiers back with, better, proper equipment, not letting them go back with the wrong equipment. But more than that was making sure that they had the right resources to be able to go there, and making sure they had the right support system around that, which was really, really important because of everything that was coming out of Israel at that time. So for me, even going there, I actually went to visit 2 weeks into the war. I went to visit all the soldiers all around the bases in the north of Israel, in the south of Israel, by Gaza, by the Yudav Shomron in the West Bank, and you were able to see how many of the soldiers were just really struggling, and besides for really struggling, just with everything's going on and not knowing what's happening. But it was a mess. The whole logistical part of it was really a nightmare. And just people were just asking us every day, could you bring in this? I have this scope. I have this piece that I just need for a gun. I have these other things. And again, we're not an equipment organization. We deal with the well-being, but it was just amazing to see like how much it
Well,
lit up
you
their
have to
faces.
be alive to deal with your well-being. So you
Agreed.
need to have the
And
equipment.
but it lit up their faces when they actually got
Right.
they actually had a magazine that worked, or they had a gun that worked, or a scope, because going into a battle without it was really a struggle.
What did your day-to-day at Nivut look like before October 7th, and what does it look like after October 7th?
Before October 7th, it was a three-person show, meaning as that we dealt with the soldiers coming back here, and we had so many that were, just needing that guidance and support, and it was really trying to be able to bring out this idea that mental health isn't a taboo topic for these soldiers. We had soldiers from 2014 war that unfortunately Sukeitan that were attempting suicide. This is in the summer of 2023, and for years already we've been helping with just getting them therapy, being able to speak to them, helping them get back on their feet with a job after. And it was kind of you're speaking to the wall of like there's really soldiers that are struggling and no one realizes this is 10 years later or 9 years after the war, and no one's realizing how many of them are really just struggling, and then others have been in combat since then are really struggling and they need this support. So having group therapies for them, being able to just have programmings where they can get together was very important, but it was on a smaller scale. We were able to do it, with up to 750 soldiers, which was a lot for us, but it was just a small show. And then you talk about all of a sudden October 7th came and the amount of calls nonstop ringing, people needing the support for the soldiers, of just people were really messed up from this war. We knew that from the beginning. But you know, many people went into Gaza and people were their friends were getting killed and people that they knew, and and the second later they're coming back to the United States. And again, my own story, going back into, I was, we're getting bombed at and from Hezbollah in the north, and I give back in my gun, my equipment, and then literally that night I'm on a flight back to United States. I arrive in Newark, and I think it was 6 in the morning. Get a cab back to my house, and I'm taking my kids to school an hour later. And here we are in the United States, in that struggle of like, wait, there's a war going on in Israel. The hostages are still there. This war's not done, and I'm literally in a war zone. You still hear everything that's going on from the war, and then you're just like, no one gets you, and you're just like just back to normal life. You're taking your kids and you're dealing with the regular day-to-day stuff. It's brutal. Like people don't realize that, and they think it's just like, hey, you're a hero. But again, I'm speaking for myself as someone, not only just as an individual, as Ari Abramowitz, as a person. It's really rough just getting back in when all these things are happening, and again, even a few months ago when losing four guys in my team of 20, then six of them were injured, and just being, just what does that do for everyone? What does that do for yourself? And then when you hear, Daniel, I know you said you're in a bad mood today or whatever it may be, and just hearing what's happening right now in Israel, like it's brutal. It almost feels like we're giving up this war, and it's like, come on. And
I'm
that's
in a,
that's
I'd say this, addressing my mood on this. I'm in a sad mood because I know how much time and effort and sacrifice has gone into the last 16 months that people would do 100 times out of 100 all over again. And I heard something from Sinai Gedalia, the wife of Yosef Gedalia, Hashem Yakom Damo, and she said that, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it's essentially saying, I mourn what we had, but also mourn the future that we lost, that we had, and we don't have together anymore. And I have this immense sadness for the families of those who fell, for the families that are dealing with mental health issues now as a result of the war, for the guys who all of a sudden you go from 400 days plus Miluim trying to free the hostages and destroy Hamas, and their business is gone, their way of life is non-existent, and that's a real thing that you can't just flick a switch or sign a piece of paper and and everything's fine. And those are real. These are real families, real people, and I'm just sad when I think about confronting that very big ball of emotion. And when I see people that, God willing, will be reunited with their loved one who's been held in captivity, I am so happy. And on a personal level, that's what motivated us with Unit 11741, because we were trying to make sure that people could come home safely, whether they're on the fighting side or whether they need to be freed. And that's all we cared about. And at the same time, you see people who lost their husband or their son or their cousin, and they feel that such a deal is spitting on the grave of their loved one because they went to make sure that we would never have to fight like this again, and they don't feel that that's been accomplished. And to me, it's just sad. And it's sad seeing that have to play out very publicly and politically, because the politics of it are so gross. And at the end of the day, I don't care where anyone is on the voting spectrum in Israel or in America. Every sane Jewish person wants all the hostages home and wants to make sure that people have a safe and mentally, emotionally sound home. And just to see that we're not even close on any of that, it's really hard to comprehend the scope of it. And my heart's just broken for the Jewish people. And
I'm gonna tell you one thing that I think is really like the challenging part for as a soldier, and this is something that Chaim Meisels you had on as a guest before, Captain Chaim Meisels, who's just someone that we he deals with the well-being of the lone soldiers here in Nivut, which is really amazing that he dedicates his time when he's not fighting in the war and he's back here. I think the thing he brought up to me the other day was he said when this deal goes through, it emotionally could break a lot of people. And it's when you posted on your status today, guys, they're talking about the Fogel family's murderers should be released. Are we normal? These people that have went and just literally went to stab and kill these people for the price of what? It's like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What?
They
And
stabbed a baby.
it doesn't make sense. And then you're going back and we talked about this from the beginning of the war. Which sane person we're seeing our soldiers are getting killed in the exact same places where we left. And here it is and you know what? And you said this from the beginning, which is the most powerful thing about Am Yisrael right now, is we're going to go back and fight. Ari Abramowitz next month is going back to Miluim. Yeah, why? I run the organization that's helping thousands of soldiers that are back here in the States, but still, I have to make sure that my team, my unit, Am Yisrael, I'm still part of it. We're making sure to defend the Jewish people. But at the same time, you're like, at what cost? What are we doing over here? We're going to send out these people that have murdered others, and here we go, and we're going to right now go and give them up because you know what? Again, I want the hostages to come back more. That's what we're fighting for also. We're also fighting for that doesn't happen again. If you're going to release another Sinwar, there's going to be another attack, another October 7th, and double the amount of that. And what are we tying our hands for? And everyone else, so there's hostages, but we also have the soldiers and all the families and everyone that was lost. And we have to take that into account. And there's no way to comfort them but by saying what the real objective was to obliterate Hamas, make sure they're never a thing. How do you even negotiate with them? And to be able to give back people that murdered life sentences, like this is crazy. And it just, I know for so many of us, as being a soldier and being someone there, we're going to still defend Am Yisrael. It's not something that we're going to walk away and say, okay, we're abandoning ship, because we'll never do that. This is the power of the Jewish people, but it doesn't make sense. It's wrong. It's really, really wrong. And again, politicians will say one thing. They'll, again, I think you put this out there. There'll be fundraising for flip-flops, while in the middle of our country getting destroyed. But we have to do better than this.
And again, I'll say this, like and I'm going to say the Yoav Gallant Busha of a person, that person is. He was in Chicago raising money at a hot dog and hamburger barbecue 5 days after Hamas posted a video where they tried to blow up a fence next to Kisufim. This is 6 weeks before October 7th. Like, something is just off. It's just off. The Minister of Defense should not be attending a fundraiser, first of all. Second of all, the fundraiser shouldn't be in Chicago. And it's insulting that you now have to, that these are the types of people that are making the decision and are sitting here giving some sort of moral authority. He even said people that oppose the deal are not Jewish, not Zionist, and not humane. I mean, come off it. It's really just quite offensive. What I'll say also in the terms of the deal, and again, my position is I'm just really sad for everyone. And I'm particularly sad for the families of Hadar Golden and Aron Shul. I don't know if you saw, but Hadar Golden's parents actually posted yesterday that they had been promised by Prime Minister Netanyahu and elected officials that no terrorist the terrorists that were released in the Shalit deal, that were recaptured during Tzuk Eitan, they were promised that none of those soldiers would be released without the bodies of Hadar Golden and Aron Shul. And it appears that they will actually be released in this agreement. And the defense of the elected officials would say, well, they didn't anticipate that Hamas would overrun the country and it would be a very different circumstance with live hostages. And that's a sound defense for why that would potentially change, in my opinion. But it doesn't lessen the immense pain and hurt. And then those families plus other families, you see us giving COVID vaccines into Gaza. We're now have to send 600 trucks of aid a day, and we are funding the people that largely want to murder us. And it's actually just deeper than that. If you see a picture of a Gazan child bleeding on Instagram, there isn't a single sane person who cares about the state of Israel who would put a laughing emoji or make it LOL or that's what happens when you try to invade Israel. Not one person, not one who's sane would say such a thing or write such a thing. But I've seen from posting things, and one of the projects of Unit 11741 is the Remember the Hero IDF, in which we're trying to commemorate people who've fallen in war. And I just get these crazy people, laughing emojis, watermelon emojis, free Palestine, you Zion Nazis, this is your fault. It doesn't display a humanity. And it's really hard to see that that is what's being fed by Israel. How does that feel as a soldier?
I'm going to say it like this again. I can't speak for every soldier out there, and this is really
How
as an
does it feel
organization.
for Rabbi Ari Abramowitz, not as a representative of Nivut, but as on a personal level, when you see the lengths that Israel has to go to, in fact, putting your brothers in arms in harm's way to try to feed Gazans, when you know Hamas is sending aid?
Honestly, and I say this 2 points. As a soldier, we don't see the big picture. We really don't in anything we do. Meaning we have something called, and they call it in the army, you have a gimel gimel. You have Vulgazar, where you are on this side, where you are on this side. You don't shoot outside of that. This is your mission. This is what you're dealing with. So Ari Abramowitz right now, you're on the front lines. You're not worried what's going on in Syria because you're focused on here. This is where you are. You're a foot soldier. This is your very clear thing. And everyone's going to say we don't realize what's going on in the big picture. And maybe I don't. Maybe I do. Maybe the whole world does. It just seems that this thing's really wrong. Really wrong that they should even release one murderer for an innocent civilian that was literally just at their home. That's the most brutal thing. How do you even negotiate with someone for that? Like, someone posted today, like, imagine someone right now kidnaps two people on the streets in New York City. So all of a sudden, for them, they're gonna release now 40 drug dealers in the cities in exchange for that. Like, who does that? No one does that. You release 2,000 terrorists, people that are actually have done murderous things to kill people, and it's not that maybe they've actually been involved in that. And here you are, and you're releasing them, and it really affects the psyche of myself, of everyone else, and all the soldiers. And again, I know you asked just about me, and I think it's really hard being someone like that, especially knowing that again, I see the guys coming back every day. They're broken. They're broken. It's really hard, and I'm not taking that for granted. And seeing that the guys in my team that were injured and killed and all that, and you just think, is this what we're giving it for? So now that that they're looking on high at us, and they're like, what was my life given up for? Is that they could be safe, they could have a beautiful life moving forward, not that they're going to start doing more terrorists. And I think this is the challenge for myself that I'm feeling. This is the challenge I think many of the soldiers are feeling right now, and I think I was just hoping to wake up to that there would be a change in this hostage deal negotiations of something like crazy different or something that we don't know because it's totally backwards. At least
I,
from
I'm,
my opinion, not speaking on behalf of anyone else,
right.
just for me
I
personally.
think, by the way, I think it's important that the audience understands that there's plenty of opinions within Israel and within the IDF and people who have fought, and I think it's helpful to understand what's behind these things and what's going on. I'm going to mention one story for you when we were talking about the aid. So it was in late November, and the U.S. is putting a lot of pressure on Israel about tents and food and everything going into Gaza. And I remember reading a headline that Israel purchased some exorbitant amount of tents and they have to provide it. Of course, none of the Arab countries can do this. It has to be Israel for this specific purchase. I'm not sure why. And then I got a call from the logistics officer in a Sadir brigade saying that they've changed the assignment for where those soldiers are going to be sleeping in about 9 hours and for the next 2 days. And they are actually left without tents. And if they don't get tents, they might be sleeping on the beach or in a trench or something like that. And he asked if he could have my credit card to purchase tents for the entire Gadud. And that's what we did. But it was wild to me that I'm sitting here watching Israel pay for tents for Palestinians who overwhelmingly support October 7th and Hamas, and we have to go buy the tents or the shelter for the soldiers that are trying to free the hostages.
Uh,
It was one of those moments where I said everything is upside down, and I it's hard to. I'm gonna have to really write down all of these stories as they come up because there's so many of them that we could just forget. Um, I want
I
to
mean,
really dive
yeah.
into the Nivut stuff here. What kind of mental state are most of the soldiers in when they are reaching out to Nivut and they're engaging with your programming after what they've been through in the Iron Swords War?
Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a crazy statistic. We just got numbers back from research from professors in Yale and one of the universities in New York. They did a survey on lone soldiers that are soldiers from outside of Israel that served in this war compared to Israelis that served in this war, and their 75% are dealing with PTSD symptoms from this war, which is crazy. And as lone soldiers compared to Israelis, which are on a much smaller rate. And I say this with the most love that people should just understand this. This war was not something we've seen, and again, maybe since the Yom Kippur War, this kind of just brutality that's been there, and it's ongoing. It's a long war. It's not easy, and I think the biggest challenge also is, it's not ending. It's really not. It's just continuing, continuing, and continuing, and getting called up. This is my unit's fourth time getting called right now. The fifth time getting called right now. It's a lot. It's, year and a half, 5 times getting called up. It's insane. And the soldiers are a lot of them, put on a face of, I'm a warrior. I could do this. I'm going back into the workforce. I just got out of Gaza. I was in Lebanon, and you see them, and there's like a lot of red flags going on because you speak to them like, yeah, I'm up in the middle of the night, I'm not sleeping. You see they're sometimes like a little out of it. You see other things that there's red flags. They're smoking more. They're doing some drugs or other things, and you're like, yeah, okay, there's red flags, but sometimes you're just still in it too much to even recognize it. And then there's other family members that are coming to us as an organization saying, hey, could your case management team, could your team reach out to this soldier? And we have a lot of programs that go on, whether it's from, group therapy to being able to have case managers that reach out to them, doing, intake with them, making sure that they're okay, having professionals. We have, consultations with therapists that understand veterans, like just coming out here. We have an intensive therapy retreat that we continuously do. And again, these pieces are really important because our goal is to normalize the challenges of the soldiers after. Meaning everyone's gonna there's no one experience. If anyone comes to you and says, "Hey, our organization, we figured out the recipe for soldiers that are coming back," it's not true. Every soldier is different. Everyone handles war differently. There's no one way. Some guys gonna be smiling, and other ones are gonna be at home isolated. Other ones are gonna be so involved in work that they're putting in 80 to 100 hours a week of work just to be able to shut their brain off of everything around. And then there's others that are just stuck at home, can't even get out. And we deal with all those types. And people are struggling that we know every day. And unfortunately, I mentioned this before to you, Daniel, and I just want to be clear on this for our listeners. There are soldiers that committed suicide here in the United States that served in the IDF. And I'm talking about soldiers are really struggling. And if we could mitigate the struggles, help it before it gets to that bad point, it could be tremendous. It could save lives, and we have to do that because Israel's not taking care of it. We spoke to Ministry of Defense. They're like, we can't deal with what we're dealing with in Israel. Kol hakavod, thank you for what you're doing in America. We really can't deal with these numbers. They're dealing with Israel with 30%. But again, the problem is the system's broken, Daniel. It's really a broken system. The only way to get help in Israel is if you consider yourself that you are an injured veteran, if you're an injured soldier, and if you have PTSD. What happens if I'm someone struggling, but I want to stay with my unit? I'm not going to tell them that I'm struggling because if I tell them I'm struggling, they're never going to let me go back to my unit. Or I'm going to get, messed up. I'm not going to be able to get a gun license or something else going to happen. So why would I even tell you that I'm struggling? So I'm not going to get the help that's needed. So the whole system is messed up that way to help out the soldiers, and we have to change that. And that's where we're fighting right now as an organization of, okay, we got to go around the government, and we just have to go to private donors, be able to raise funding for it, make sure the soldiers have therapy, be able to get more resources all around the United States, because this is something that's forgotten about. You have the United States, you have 55,000 veteran organizations for U.S. veterans, and then here in the United States, there's nothing. It's like really a struggle. Like there's thousands of lone soldiers back here, thousands and thousands more of Israelis. You're talking about the numbers are big in the United States. People don't realize that of how many veterans from Israel are back here, and this is going to be a challenge not just for now. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that Nivut's going to close down, and it would be my biggest dream. Like, hey, this is not needed. But the reality is, with our motto, we say for the battle after the war, and we said that from day one. Like, there's a battle that's going on under the helmet, and we need the helmets. And Daniel, I'm going to say to Unit 11741, like, you guys have saved the lives of my teammates, of my team, and I know it because we have the helmet, the pictures, the ball bearings when 4 of the guys on my team were killed, and there were 6 more injured. One of them, his helmet, it was stopped, the Sharfanel stopped and saved his life. So I'm forever grateful to you guys because you saved another member of my team, and that's huge. But it's also what's under that helmet, what they all saw right now, because that event is over where we had guys that were killed, but it doesn't leave. It doesn't leave. We carry it the rest of our lives. We carry the people that were with us for the rest of their lives. And I'm going to bring one more thing just so you know, and to everyone out there. There's something called moral injury. For example, Ari Abramowitz, my team went into Lebanon on right before Rosh Hashanah. I called my officer up and said, we have a program that's going on Rosh Hashanah and Simchat Torah this year, a year later after the war, because we were going into Lebanon. I said, I can't come till after because we're doing a program in the United States for the veterans that are here. Many of them came back already, and we want to make sure that they have. And I'll come back after. And on Simchat Torah, we were having a program. This was on Thursday morning, and we were in the middle of having the meal. One of the soldiers asked me, he says, Ari, are you in the Carmel unit? I said, yeah. He said, there were 4 soldiers that were killed today. And I was like, there's 5,000 soldiers in this unit. Like, okay, like it's probably me. I was like thinking of a lone soldier or two that I know from like other units part of it, and shows me the phone, and I'm like, no, that you're joking, right? That's my command. That's my commander from New York. This other guy. These guys are my team, and it's the middle of the holiday, and it just broke inside of me. It was honestly, Daniel, I can't say it enough. The moral injury of being far away. Not that I'm, again, obviously I'm grateful I'm alive. It's my team and all that stuff, and I'm going to continue pushing on for my teammates. But also not being there with them, and then the flights were you couldn't even get flights to Israel, so you weren't there for the funerals. I missed it because it was still a holiday, and in Israel it wasn't the holiday. These were guys I fought along with during the war, so I wasn't there for that. And like, you feel a little bit out of it as well. You're far away. They're all meeting together every week or two. They're getting together, my whole team, and it's just like there's a lot of hurt inside, a lot of hurt and pain. And I'm just talking for myself as an individual. Besides for running the organization, Daniel, as an individual, it's painful. When we had our intensive therapy program, Daniel, just so you know this, I came there to open it up we had 14 soldiers that came on a 5-day intensive therapy retreat. And I was there just to open it up for everyone because it's a very intensive program. We have 4 therapists there. It's constant. There's a lot of work to do for the soldiers that got back here. And I started speaking, and there was a helicopter that we were in the middle of nowhere. This retreat center we were at that we got for the organization for Nivut was the closest place was 5 miles away. We're in the middle of nowhere, and a helicopter happened to be flying by, and it literally brought me right back in towards the war. And I was like, wow. I told my wife, I said to my wife, Rachel Shira, I'm like, Rachel Shira, I need to stay by this retreat. Like, I need it myself. I didn't realize I'm dealing with the soldiers every day, the veterans, and I'm struggling myself tremendously, and it was just life changing for me. But again, I'm just real about this. Like I know I'm going through the struggle. I have, thank God, 4 kids, and what it is for the spouses. I know you had one of the spouses on the other day on your show, and people don't realize the amount of support that's needed for the spouses and the parents every day.
I'm
Dealing
also
with
going to say,
parents and spouses is huge.
I'm also going to say in-laws, grandparents. I've had the honor of, through this work, meeting so many people that are I now dear friends, and I got to have really deep conversations with them, and had dinner with one couple that lost their son-in-law, but nobody really thinks about that because they're not technically mishpachot kolot, they're not technically bereaved family when it comes to how they're identified. And also grandparents. I had lunch with someone who lost their grandson, and it's crazy. They're talking about creating small groups for grandparents to talk to each other, grandparents who lost grandchildren. It's really, it's crazy. And people, it's not saying people have bad intentions. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things grabbing at people's attention, and to try to keep these things at the top of mind. I want to ask you one question about that incident, and you talked about moral injury. Do you feel guilty that you weren't there?
I don't feel guilty that I wasn't there as in like, oh, I should have been killed. Like oh, I was one of the
No,
guys
but
that.
do you feel like this happened, and maybe like a kind of survivor's guilt, if people would say that?
So that's what
Not
I'm
that
saying.
saying you would have been hurt, but
right. I just feel like when I was so many miles away, I was 6,000 miles away, and was planning on literally joining the team a few days later with them, and all of a sudden, like, I had no idea because it was the holiday as well. So I didn't have my phone on me to, like, again, I have my phone for emergencies because we have a 24/7 hotline for Nivut for for well-being crisis, mental health crisis for soldiers if they need. So my phone's always on. We have other professionals also have theirs on for our phone line, which is really vital piece. But I wasn't gonna check, so I had no idea who was injured, what the things were. And you're just like, what's the status? Is it that when it says six more injured, does it mean like everyone's like, just like clinging for life, like critical? Like they don't talk about that. You don't know. And then like even till today, like I don't know exactly the real details what happened. Meaning I keep on watching over the video of like they found a massive bunker of Hezbollah supplies that, and then literally one of the soldiers on my team says, "Hey, we're going to be dancing in a few hours because it's going to be Simchat Torah." And and all those guys four of those guys are not here anymore. And again, and the other six were injured. And yeah, like, this is my team, and it's just from their GoPro footage. And it's like you're supposed to kind of be there, but you don't like. And it's like it's almost like you're watching from a movie. I would almost say to you just to understand this better, like you like could get it, but you can't get it because you weren't there. But it's your team, it's your own guys. So you're just like, what happened, what didn't happen, I don't even know. And you almost feel like you're not part of them, but you are. Like I'm going back in a month from now, and this is gonna be my first time seeing them since 3 months ago. And when the guys were killed, and like just like you almost feel like an outsider. And it's not just for me; it's like thousands of others feel that way also. And so it's a real struggle being far away, 6,000 miles away.
And it, you're also processing it by yourself. You might have other people who have gone through similar incidents, but they're not with that team. I think that also makes a little bit of a difference because I would imagine dealing, being able to talk to someone who was literally also trying to find shelter the second and third week of October 2023 and having that common bond and having been with the team all the way through would relate to the incident differently than someone who lost their brother in arm in Suketan or in a different way, even though they also went through this enormous loss. It's just different when you can connect on that level. And yeah, it's something that the news doesn't fully appreciate. I mean, I was talking to a soldier who was in the middle of a conversation with his friend, and then an RPG came through the window and killed his friend, like literally obliterated him. And he got shrapnel and is recovering, but many surgeries, and it's a long road. And in the news, it might say a moderately injured soldier was evacuated in addition to the soldier who fell. But that doesn't fully encapsulate the mental side of what someone is going through and the way in which they relate to that friend's legacy and that friend's life and their family and their girlfriend and their kids. And it just changes how people see things. And I don't know that, I think it's important that organizations like Nivut continue to bring attention to the mental health needs of soldiers because these are real things, and just the extent of what's going on. I mean, Israel never fought a war like this in the history of Israel. And you have some soldiers that ran down south on the 7th, saw things that no one should ever have to see, went to Gaza, and then lost friends in Gaza, and they're still going on. And it's, you could have therapy for the rest of your life dealing with just responding to October 7th itself, let alone losing a soldier or having to witness what's going on in Gaza or bombs falling all over you. And it's very, very complex. And it's one of these things where, I'm of the belief that just like people give to their local, their kid's school or their shul, taking care of the soldiers of the IDF has to be a priority as well. And that's not just equipment. It's making sure that they can live a functioning, successful life and have options and decisions and be able to get out of bed in the morning. And I know, and it extends to the bereaved families as well. And it's important that people continue to step up and not just say, "Oh, Israel's a country; they're going to take care of it," because that's not. There's so many things going on. If you want to have, don the kafskos and you want to cut some slack to the Ministry of Defense and elected officials, which I'm not of that school necessarily, but you could say there's just so many problems that they can't possibly deal with everything, and that means that people should work extra hard so they can give extra tzedakah and try to help as much as possible, because these problems are immense. Immense.
I think one thing I wanna share with you, just a nice little story that happened, and again, just to get understanding for the listeners and the viewers. What's this whole thing that you have? You have soldiers are fighting in a war, and for fighting in general, just and you don't know who's alongside of you, who's not, who it is. And we had an event in Manhattan for Nivut. We had for the soldiers. We do a lot of community get-togethers, in which the point of that is that you go speak to someone, you meet other people that understand you, and we have something called the Eyes and Ears program where we train, the soldiers to be on the lookout for someone that could be struggling. What are the red flags? Psychological first aid, suicide prevention. Just we want to have the events where there's a community where they're here for each other. They understand each other, what they're going through. And there were two soldiers that were together, and they were speaking to each other at an event we had in Manhattan. One of them says, "Hey, I see you're in this unit." He points to the guy's shirt that had a logo of the guy's unit on it, and he said, "Oh, were you in this place inside the war?" And he was like, "Yeah, I was there." He's like, "Oh, I was also there." He's like, "Were you at this and this place where there were the soldiers that were injured?" He's like, "Yeah, that was my commander that was injured. I was there going to get the guys down." He's like, "Well, I was the tank officer right there." And all of a sudden, they were able to talk to each other, and their eyes lit up. They finally were able to get closure on something that happened to them that they were just that no one knew, no one saw from the outside. These two people never met each other because one's inside a tank, one's on the foot on the ground. They're talking about the same exact incident. And here they are, they meet 6,000 miles away out of a war zone at an event. And it literally, it made such an impact on them. And I'm going to tell you the flip side of a crazy story that we had from the first Lebanon war. There was a soldier, a lone soldier, that was put into a new unit because he went to the reserves and he didn't know anyone, and he did heroic things under fire, saving people. And he went back to the States after, and unfortunately, people were killed in that incident that he had in Lebanon. He was struggling with PTSD for years, but there was no one that understood. People were just thinking maybe he's crazy. Go fast forward all the way to from 1982 to 2019, 2020, COVID breaks out. And he's still in a bad place and this person's really struggling. And he happens to find on Facebook a group of people that served, Israeli soldiers that served in the first Lebanon war. And he sees that someone writes about this incident that happened. He's like, I was there. And all of a sudden, he connected with the people that he actually saved, and he had no idea who they were. This is 40 years later. It literally, it saved his life. I'm going to use that. Like he changed
That's
completely.
absolutely crazy.
He met them in Israel. He now, like the people that, and it's his brotherhood, and he had no idea, he didn't know their names, nothing. And they're like, wait, you were that American that was the guy that saved people under fire. And it was like, I remember him telling me this story before when he was struggling in 2018, I met with him for breakfast, and he was just telling me about these struggles that no one's going to believe the stories. And then when this happened, I was like, wow.
And
And
you're
this is the
dealing with
power of
so you're dealing
community.
with soldiers that go back decades, or that's not
We
common.
we really no, so we really deal with the ones coming back in the past, from pretty much from 2010, 11, 12, that time. But this person wanted to be able to help out. He's like, hey, I want to help out. I'm a soldier that was struggling and struggling still. If there's anyone I can mentor, like that's one of the
Wow,
big things
that's
that we
so
try to
nice.
do is help them be able to mentor the other people out there. So that's really where our support is. But it helps them help themselves, when they're able to help out others.
Wow, it's small world, and it. I had a. It's crazy how there's so many stories that not quite as dramatic as putting something together 40 years later, but I've seen in my smaller interactions of soldiers having been at similar, being involved in the same incident or in the same area, and again, not even knowing the people on the other side necessarily. And um, what what's your what's your thought process as you think about the next year or so for Nivut?
The next year for Nivut is a critical one for us. It's straight out. It's a point for us to be able to make sure that the soldiers that are going to be coming back now have the tools and the resources to be able to normalize what they're going through. Because if we could do that, we're going to save many lives. Because it's a weird time right now. It's a very, very weird time. And sometimes things take time to heal, but we need to be able to have the support staff for that. Again, we have three case managers, one that deals with the spouses as well, deals with the parents, but we also have ones that are dealing with critical cases that are important, high priorities, people that are suicidal. We have a team for that. We have and then we have teams that people just need help with jobs, and then the other people that are just struggling that need help with referrals for therapy. But that those numbers will just keep on coming bigger. But our big point that we're trying to really be able to bring out very strong is the strength is going to be through community, and the strength is going to be through us making sure that people are aware that there's support out there for them and normalizing it. Because if we could do that, it's going to save lives because people are going to know that there's an address to turn to, and it's in their own community. We have chapters in California, we have it in Florida, we have in New Jersey. They'll get together. Sometimes it's once every 2 months, sometimes it's once a month, sometimes it's just joining the chat, and they'll be able to just connect with each other. Yesterday in Florida, we were able to give two soldiers, get them interviews for a job through someone. Again, it was just there's different resources you have. You have that, and also in what's it called, Chicago recently, there was one like that. You had in Texas. Yeah, there's just it's all over, but it's also the power of the people around, and they have to know that there's others that were in those shoes and are experiencing it. And I think something that's unique about what we're dealing with is lone soldiers. So with that point, that's really important for them is it's a certain language. I went there, I didn't understand the language going there. It's a different thing. I'm coming from America and coming back here, it's a different language also. And especially coming from this war, it's going to be critical that they know that they can just get to normalize themselves, get a consultation too, let them be aware of the resources out there. So if they start going down that bad path, they'll be able to get out of it by getting the help, and their parents and spouses could see that as well. But even more than that is we're making a very big push to train the soldiers on the ground with workshops and the Eyes and Ears program to make sure that they're aware of the soldiers that are struggling.
And when you're
Because
talking about you talk about Eyes and Ears program and signs, what are those signs?
so the signs that if anyone wants to Google it, you can Google what are the struggles of veterans coming back from war. And the problem is it's such as I said before, there could be someone that you think is the most successful guy. He's working 120 hours a week, and like, wow, this guy's doing great. Those are red flags. Someone that's not working, that's another red flag. Someone that's waking up in the middle of the night and not sleeping, and this is a very, very big thing that we saw by the Sukeitan War. People are getting up in the middle of the night, start cooking. People are doing more, all of a sudden they're more withdrawn. People are spending a lot more time going back to the reserves even. It sounds crazy to say that. People that constantly are going back there and they're just not being able to get back on their feet. These are red flags that you have to just notice of what's going on. So it takes a lot of
So you're saying
street
it's
smarts as well.
change of behavior or kind of an obsessiveness?
It's both. That's what I'm saying. It's not. There's no. It. You have to be. You have to take a holistic approach with each person to understand where their behavior was before and where they are now as well. And this is part of our intake and part of what we do is we see a soldier that's coming back right now, and you're speaking to them, and you just hear like, you hear from them. They're over. They're over. Over intense right now on something. They're just hypersensitive to certain things. Or you see them, all of a sudden they're getting angry more faster. You see there's other struggles in their relationships. I mean, I can't say this enough, and I know we don't have that much time. It's just like the amount of people that are struggling with marriage after from this war, with the soldiers that are struggling, we're working with other organizations to get the support for them to get there because it's a real thing.
What kind of stuff?
What kind of stuff is it? Very clear is and again, I could just talk about this that people understand is the husband's going back and forth, they're coming back, their friends, being withdrawn. And I'm talking about even for myself as a husband, what's it like for my wife knowing that, her husband's going back, doesn't know, he's ready, he has his bag ready, is he going there, is he going to be gone or not? How much pressure does it put on the spouse? How much does it put on the relationship? And how much does it put on someone's job? All of a sudden they don't have a job or they're like, hey, I don't want to get to work right now, or I'm going to lose my job, but I need to go back there to serve. And these are questions that we get all the time. The amount of hours that we've spent on this during the war, and we've had workshops and we've had Zooms and one-on-one times with the soldiers of, is it the right thing to go back to the war right now? And you have to take every situation, what's going on with your family, how's your wife dealing with it, how are your kids dealing with it, how's your job doing, are they going to accept you back here? These are all questions, and there are many questions that we ask and we go through to be able to give them guidance on that because there's no clear-cut answer for each person. Everyone's different, but these are real questions that come and real challenges that we're dealing with.
I've heard of, unfortunately, a number of marriages ending and other issues that are going on from the result of combined factors there, right? You can never say it's in every case that it's 100% because of it, but there could be underlying things otherwise. But it's definitely a stress, an added component to it. I'll tell you on a personal level, obviously I'm not in the formal IDF, and what we're doing, raising money, is nothing like putting our lives on the line. I'll add personally that it was kind of comical to me. Someone asked me, "Oh, does your wife want to come to so and so event about Israel?" And I said, since October 7th, every single day and everything has been about trying to help the soldiers and help Israel. And she just needs a break from that. It's not. I'm not gonna. If we're gonna go for a night out, it's not gonna be to go to an event about it because it just doesn't work. It's what's talked about all the time. My phone's constantly buzzing. Everything's soldiers every day, every hour. When Israel was preparing to go into Lebanon, it was every 10 minutes. I had times where it was every 5 minutes. I mean, and I was like, no, that's not going to be a night out activity because it's just too much. And I can only imagine what that's like for someone who's, wife of a soldier living in Israel, or the wife of a lone soldier when you come back to America and you just want to have some semblance of normalcy, but you always have that idea on your shoulder that maybe I need to go back now. Maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to do that. And it's also really hard to just reintegrate into life. I will never forget in American Sniper, they have that scene of Chris Kyle at the bar after he finished his last tour. And his wife calls him thinking he's still overseas. But he said, I'm getting ready to come home. I just have to get to the right spot. And he came to America, but he couldn't get himself to walk in the door. And it's not easy walking into a room after being shot at by Hezbollah and then all of a sudden having the privilege of driving your children to school or being around it, but it's not so simple. It's not as straightforward. And it doesn't take being a reservist being shot at Hezbollah to understand that. I can understand that from my shoes. I hope that everyone can keep thinking about these amazing people who have put their lives on the line and their livelihood on the line and the wellness of their family on the line and their entire existence on the line to try to defend Jewish people. And I think the least that people can do is stay in close contact and try to help however that might be. And Nivut's obviously the way to go when it comes to soldiers here in America. And it's an important thing. I know that the Jewish people in the Jewish community are up to the task. It's just a matter of making sure that the resources and the support gets there effectively. So before we sign off here, what's the most inspiring thing you've seen in the last 16 months?
I'll tell you the most inspiring thing I see is, again, obviously, Daniel, thank you for hosting me in about Nivut. Again, it's really been special, but I'm going to end it off with the most powerful story that I had. Again, one of them, there's so many, but when I mentioned from the beginning, at the beginning of the war, we went to Israel as an organization right away to be able to make sure to visit our soldiers that are on the front lines. And we were just going base to base to base, giving them hugs. We had professionals with our therapists as well. They gave them the equipment, just making sure they just felt that they had the people there for them, because when we knew when they would come back, they knew that we were there for them, not only when they're back home, but when they were on the front lines. And that was so important to us. And we were just out from 6 in the morning till 12, 1 in the morning, just going base to base to base. And we got to the north of Israel, and we needed a place to stay, and we didn't have anything. People do missions to Israel all the time now. Many organizations, they get these fancy hotels. They'll go to the Waldorf, they'll go to somewhere else, they'll stay at a beautiful place. We said if we're going to the front lines, we're not making any arrangements before. We know which areas we're going to be in, where we're going to be, and we're going to try to find somewhere to stay, because it's really we're not here to go on a vacation. We're here to be there for the guys that are going through the trenches right now, giving their lives up. And so we were up north, and we needed a place to stay. And we reached out to someone. He said, "Oh, I have someone that you guys could stay at." We go to this house, and we're staying there. It's a beautiful house, and we appreciate the person for letting us stay by his house. And the next morning, we got there at like 2 in the morning. The next morning, I think it was at like 6:30 in the morning. We're getting ready to head out, and the owner comes, and we say, "Thank you so much. Like how long have you been living here? It's a beautiful place." It's like, "I'm living here 1 week." I'm like, "You're living here 1 week?" It's like, "Looks all arranged. And thank you for hosting us. You're just brand new in here." He's like, "Well, actually, my family, we live right by the Gaza border, and we were evacuated, and we were sent to a hotel, and it was just too crowded there. So we found the Airbnb, and we took it." And we're like, "You were just evacuated from your house, dumped in a hotel, and now you went to get an Airbnb, and you have no idea who these 7 strangers are that are staying in your house right now, but you opened up your door for them, moved your kids to another room, so these people could come and help out the soldiers. This is the achdut. This is the unity of what we have." And I honestly feel, Daniel, tell everyone out there, the nation was broken October 6th. And, and October 7th brought this unity like no other. You see that with Unit 11741, how the people come together, rally behind every soldier, and continue doing that. It's needed. And even for Nivut, you asked what the big things are. We have to be able to raise the funding for this. There's no big organizations doing the government, but it's this unity of everyone coming together to be able to do it, be able to give, be able to do whatever they could. People have given way above their means, but because they recognize it's not about me, it's about the guy next to me, and it's about the soldier there. It's about the families. It's about all of us together. And if we're not together, there's going to be another October 7th, because that's what happened. And that's my fight. That's my fight every day with us. We have to just keep on going there. And I appreciate you so much for being able to bring on another organization onto your podcast, even be able to tell them about the importance of the soldiers coming back out here. But this is true unity, Daniel. This is true unity of what you're doing. And you're uniting lives, you're uniting soldiers, you're uniting the souls of the soldiers, and all of us here, myself and my family, appreciate this more than anything else. And thank you as well
No,
for
no, thank
protecting
you.
my helmet.
Well,
And
thank you. And I'll just say before to close here, it's because we're organizationally agnostic, which I hope everyone would be. And I know that you are as well. If you didn't need to exist, you wouldn't exist. You're not existing to exist and moving the goalpost and creating things that need to be dealt with under the umbrella of Nivut. You're dealing with the issues that Nivut sets out to deal with. And Unit 11741, we're concerned with the safety and security of soldiers so they can do their job, get back, and right in with that is helping soldiers, helping families that had unfortunately lost loved ones, and honoring the memories of those who fell, and promoting the unity and the achdus. It's not about whether or not someone is donating here or there. In fact, I hope someone watches this and gives a nice donation to Nivut. That would make me very happy.
appreciate
That's what it's about. It's about getting things to the right place, and it's not just about, oh, it has to be under this brand or whatever it might be. To me, that's crazy. So, whether someone voted for Meretz or voted for Mayor Kahana, you still need equipment. You still need mental health. You still need to feel that someone cares about you, and it transcends someone's religious observance, their religion, their gender, sexuality. None of it matters. We're just uniting around being decent human beings to one another and appreciating those who have gone above and beyond, whether they like it or not, and whether they even think they have or not. Because a lot of these guys, if you call them heroes and you say that you're a modern Maccabee or a sort like that, they'll say you're crazy, and that's not it. And that's also what makes Am Yisrael really special. So, Rabbi Ari, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate this, man.